everyone, this is Susan Storm, and today I wanted to answer a question that I probably get asked just about every day, and the question is, are certain Enneagram types more common among specific Myers-Briggs personality types? And because this question gets asked so frequently, I wanted to just go ahead and try to address it here. Before I really get into the data, I want to clarify that really any Myers-Briggs type can be any Enneagram type. So, if you're an ISFJ, you really could be any type 1 through 9. But there are specific trends and patterns, it seems like, from the data that certain types are more prevalent than others. So I don't want to ever say something to the effect of, well, if you are this Myers-Briggs type, you could never be this other Enneagram type, because I don't think that's accurate. And I think that where Myers-Briggs is very much like something you're born with, your Myers-Briggs type, the research shows with Enneagram, it's more of a combination of nature and nurture. So it's a combination of things you were born with, but also effects from your childhood and experiences and environment that shape your Enneagram type. So it's very likely that you'll have a whole gamut of Enneagram types for each Myers-Briggs type. That said, there has been research done on this. Heidi Priebe, who a lot of you follow her. She does the INFP and ENFP soul boot camps, and she's the author of several books on Myers-Briggs types. She ran a survey among her followers and tried to clarify which Myers-Briggs types were more common among the different Enneagram types. The one frustration that she had with it was that it was all self-reported type. And so a lot of times when people are self-reporting, they've taken maybe a free online quiz or something like that, and the results may not be 100% accurate. Get a lot of people who mistype through online quizzes, a lot of people who mistype that way, and so they might think that they're, one really common one is people think they're an INFJ and really they're an ISFP. Those two types tend to mistype a lot, and there's similar things with many other types. So whatever I say here, I think it's important just to know that yes, you can be any Enneagram type, but I also want to kind of combine Heidi's research, which I'm so thankful for, as well as what I've found as a type practitioner, and kind of blend those two those two sources of information into what I've seen as being the most common patterns with Enneagram types and Myers-Briggs types. So first of all, there are rarer and more common Enneagram types, just like there are rare and more common Myers-Briggs personality types. So with Enneagram, there was a study done, about 189,957 people to find out which types were most common and most rare with Enneagram. And they found that 9s and 6s were the most common types. So just across the board, you're going to probably find a lot more 9s and 6s in the population. Let me see what my notes say here, because I have a terrible memory. So 9s make up 16.2% of the population, and 6s make up 16.1% based on those estimates. The rarest Enneagram types are Enneagrams 8 and Enneagrams 5. So Enneagram 5s make up 4.8% of the population, and 8s make up 6.3% of the population. So you can see there's quite a big disparity. When it comes to Myers-Briggs types, this is what I've found. This is a pattern that I've found, okay? Extroverted perceiving types, so ENFPs, ENTPs, ESFPs, and ESTPs, there's a lot more 7s in that category. And that makes a lot of sense, because 7s are often like jacks of all trades. They're very like possibility focused types. They don't like being tied down. They don't like a lot of rules and structure. These are like creative, enthusiastic, energetic, possibility-seeking types. So it makes a lot of sense that they're very overrepresented among the EP personality types. So that is one trend that I definitely have noticed, and I think it makes a lot of sense that these two types often match up. My husband is an ESTP and he's a 7, and I know quite a few EPs who are 7s. I just think they appreciate the open-ended, more spontaneous, more adventurous side of life that's common with the 7 Enneagram type. And then IT types, so introverts and thinkers, there was definitely a higher representation of 5s among those types. And that also, to me, makes a lot of sense because 5s are the very more introverted Enneagram type. They like gathering data. They like analyzing things. They like understanding and looking for truth. So the fact that introverts and thinkers are often identify with 5s makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that's probably a pretty accurate matchup. That said, there are still, like ISTJs, there's a lot of sixes in the ISTJ type as well as 1s. So I think it was pretty much from what I was seeing from Heidi's results, when it came to introverts and thinkers, almost all of them, the most common was 5, except for ISTJs, which was 1 and 6. INTPs, the highest number of Enneagram types was 5, and ISTPs was 5, and INTJs was also 5. So ISTJs is the only IT types who had a different number more prevalent than 5, and that was 1 or 6. And Enneagram 6s are, again, one of the most common types, and they were fairly prevalent, kind of mid-range, actually, across the board, except for those same EP types. EP types who like the freedom, they like the spontaneity, they like the exploration and the discovery and the fun, like they tended to be underrepresented among 6s. So 6s were much more common among judging types than perceiving types, particularly IJ types. ISFJs, ISTJs, and even INFJs have quite a few 6s among their types. So what other trends did I see? Oh, feeling types and 2. There's often a correlation between 2 and feeling types, and to me that obviously makes a lot of sense because 2s are very much focused on meeting other people's needs and understanding where other people are at. They're known as the givers, so that really makes sense that it would be aligned with feeling types, especially the extroverted feeling types like ESFJs, ENFJs, ESFPs, ENFPs. We saw a lot of feeling types, and then even IFJs. There were a lot of 2s in that spectrum. ISFJs, the highest number from Heidi's research, the highest number of Enneagram types among ISFJs was 6 and 2. And then ESFJs was 2, then 6. When you get into ENFJs, 2s were the highest, and INFJs, they showed a prevalence of 4s with 2s second. Now, one thing that so many people mistype as INFJs through online quizzes, so the fact that 4 was the highest self-reported type is a little bit suspect to me, just because 4 is often really highly associated with introverted feeling. So you like INFPs and ISFPs are often identify with 4s. Even if 4 isn't their main core Enneagram type, they usually relate to 4 quite a bit. So a lot of introverted feeling types, so IFPs, mistype as INFJs in those online quizzes. So I would actually go out on a limb and say that there's a lot more INFJ 6s and 2s than there are INFJ 4s, but there are still quite a few INFJ 4s, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So IFPs definitely show a preference for the 4 Enneagram type. And again, like I was just saying, that's because 4s are these introspective, they want to live types, they want to live in alignment with their feelings. They're very emotionally profound. analyzing their emotions. Very much a lot of what you read about fours is very synonymous with what you'll read about introverted feeling and what you're going to read about INFPs and ISFPs. So I definitely see a strong correlation between the IFP personality types in the Myers-Briggs system and fours in the Enneagram system. INFJs, there are INFJ fours, and there may be even quite a few. I think it's going to show up a little differently than it would be for an IFP 4. I think INFJ 4s, their vision and their insights are more the individualistic thing, but INFJs are not as much the emotionally introspective, sensitive types that IFP types are, because INFJs have a process called extroverted feeling, not introverted feeling. So for INFJs, the main thing, their dominant function is introverted intuition. So they're more focused on discerning the future, finding patterns, looking for the underlying background meaning of things. And so a lot of times INFJs are deeper, more connected to even 5s, 6s, and 2s. The 2 Enneagram type really matches up with their extroverted feeling side, because INFJs have extroverted feeling. They're very much looking outward to connect with people, to emotionally reach out to people, to share their emotions in an external way. So 2 makes a lot of sense for INFJs in some ways. 6 makes a lot of sense for INFJs because 6s are often like the troubleshooters. They want to be prepared. They want to know what's going to happen. And INFJs are all about predicting. So I definitely think that there's a strong correlation between 6 and INFJs. And then 5s are always very analytical types. They're very introverted types. They want to understand how things work, how the world works. And that also in a way matches up with INFJs and their intuition as well as their tertiary thinking side. But I think 5 would be a lot less common than 2 and 6 and even 4. Sensing judging types, there was also a lot of 6s in the sensing judging, among the sensing judging types. And I think that makes a lot of sense because 6s are very detail oriented, prepared types. They like having a plan. They like being dependable. They're very responsible types. And that really goes along with almost everything you read about the sensing judging types, the ISFJs, the ISTJs, the ESFJs, and the ESTJs. So I think it makes sense that there's a lot of 6s in the SJ community, as well as even among INFJs and INTJs. It was like a mid-range like popularity. So it makes sense to me that there's a lot of 6s in the IJ sphere, because IJs in general are types that like to be prepared. They like to anticipate, like to know what's going to happen. What other, I just have to look at my notes because like if I don't have it written down, it just like disappears from my brain. I don't know if any of you are like that. So yeah, we went into the EPs and how there's a lot of 7s in the EPs. Just a minute, let me make sure I'm not forgetting anything important. IFPs are much more likely to be 4s than other types. Feelers are much more likely to be 2s than thinkers. ITs are much more likely to be 5s than feeling types. Among ETJs, there's a lot more 8s and 3s. And that makes sense to me as well, because ETJs are very like go-getters, get things done, accomplish stuff. They like to stay objective. They like to climb the ladder, and they like challenges. So that really matches up with the challenger 8 as well as the achiever 3. So the fact that there are quite a few 8s and 3s among ESTJs and ENTJs definitely makes a lot of sense from when you look at the information about both of those types. 5s are way less common among feelers and extroverts. They are there. Like you can absolutely be an ENFJ 5. It's just a lot less common. 1 is just a rare type across the board. I think 1s make up, like look here, 8.9% of the population. So they're not a really common type. And the only type in Heidi's surveys that had 1 as the most common was You know I'm an introvert because I'm so bad at like, I have to be looking at all my papers. ISTJs were the ones that chose 1 as their as the most common Enneagram type for them. 8 was also a low, there are very few feeling 8 types. Now Heidi herself is actually a feeler who is an 8. I think 8s are just really rare. It's very, they're one of the rarest types, so you're just going to have a lower number of 8s across the board. And I think a lot of times when people think of 8s, they think of these like furious, angry fireball types. If you've ever seen like My Hero Academia and you've seen Bakugo, like that would be like the stereotypical 8, someone who's always explosive, someone who's always like doesn't pause to think through things, they just blow up. And I think that stereotype of 8s makes it sometimes hard for people to identify with them. And the stereotype is really exaggerated sometimes, unless you're dealing with like unhealthy 8s who really are really explosive. But yeah, 8 was low for feeling types, but I do want to say, just as Heidi is proof, that there are feeling 8s out there. 8s can be, while they have like a instinctive, intense energy, they can use that intense, instinctive energy to go after their values, to make the world a better place, to protect the underdogs. That's something that's really important to a lot of 8s, is to protect people who are vulnerable. They don't want to be vulnerable. That's one of their big fears, but they really do want to protect people who are in vulnerable positions. So I do think there might be more feeler 8s out there than what we see. I think a lot of feelers might just read the description of 8 and be really turned off by how angry and confrontational they sound, because a lot of feelers really don't like conflict. So that makes sense. 9s are one of the most common types. I didn't see like a huge number of 9s in Heidi's research as far as like being the most common type. ISFPs actually, it looks like here, had a fairly high rate of 9s as well as 4s. I feel like I'm saying that all wrong, like high rate of 9s. There's probably some better way of saying that, and it's probably not grammatically correct, but INFPs, after 4 being the most common type for INFPs, 9 was the second most common type for INFPs. But 9 was often kind of middle, a lot like 6. It was kind of in the mid-range for a lot of types. So, and that makes a lot of sense, because it being the most common, one of the most common Enneagram types, it makes sense that it would be fairly common among all of the different types. Now, there were, among ESTJs, 9 was like just not very common at all. ISTJs, not very common. ESFPs, there were very few 9s in the ESFP realm. And ENTJs. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because ETJs are like, tend to be very direct, go-getter types, like get things done. They state their opinion directly. They state their opinion clearly, whereas 9s are more, let me think this through. Let me see what everyone else is feeling. They're peacemaker types. 9s are peacemaker types. They're very open-minded and want to kind of understand everyone's viewpoints. And so a more direct type like a ETJ would probably, there probably would be a lot less prevalence of 9s among those types. 4s were fairly uncommon among thinkers just across the board. And yeah, that's because thinkers are going to put more weight on kind of the analytical, logical side of things than the feeling side of things, which is really, crucial for the 4 Enneagram type. So there's some of my data for you, whatever it's worth. I hope this was helpful and it kind of answers your questions a little bit about which types are more common for, each Myers-Briggs type. I want to just end this by saying, like, if you want more information about this, I'm going to try to post links here, but you can check out Heidi's article where she surveyed all the Myers-Briggs types and tried to find out which Enneagram types are most common. If you want to know about which Enneagram types are the most rare or most common, you can look at Enneagram.bz, Enneagram population distribution results. I'll try to post a link, but Enneagram population distribution results, if you Google that, you will find the study that was done among 189,957 people showing, which types were the most common to least common. So I hope this has been helpful. I know it's just throwing a lot of data at you, and some of this is really hard to tell. Like I said, you can be an INFJ 8, you can be an INFJ 2, you can be any of those types, but there definitely do seem to be patterns and certain types that are more or less common among each type. So let me know if you have any further questions. I know I have quite a few articles kind of explaining the, like I have an article on INFJs and how they might show up among the 9 Enneagram types, as well as ENFPs and how those might show up among the 9 Enneagram types. So I hope you can check those out if you're interested. And yeah, feel free to ask me any questions. And I will be back with more videos again in the future. So have a wonderful day, everybody.